Morning. I'll give it a few minutes to let people matriculate on over from the lobby.
Have some like elevator music.
All right. Who else do I need to bring into this from attendees? I know I need to bring Lisa in, right? Lisa to panelist. And who else? Josh?
Yeah.
I've got him.
You got Josh? Okay.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, hey. All right. And then Josh. Co-host. And then BC, I'm going to make you host now in case I need to jump out and around.
Okay, sounds
All
good.
you have to do is make sure you end the session when it's done, and then it'll post. Then that posts the recording. You don't have to do anything for the recording. You just have
Awesome.
to end session.
All right, I can do that.
There's that.
Probably. There's a good chance I'll mess it up, but
I just told BC that I'm in a hospital conference room and there's a PA right outside the door, so I hope nobody codes.
that would definitely make it very, very interesting.
Yeah, that would be sad.
ER, the AV version.
Q&A
I
chat.
just found a cheat code. I found a cheat code. You just take the link from this Zoom and post it in the other room, and then people can just jump straight here.
Ooh.
Cheat code.
Fancy.
Hey, good seeing everyone. Okay, I'm out. Bye.
Trying to get chat enabled, but I don't really see the where the option is to get that going. It's my first time using this platform on Zoom, so
What do you try to do?
get chat enabled.
Oh, chat should be enabled.
Yeah, it's showing enabled for me.
You know what? Oh, hold on. I remember. Okay. Click chat and then
There we go.
see there should be 3 dots.
I got it now.
And then
Should
you
be
want to
good.
make sure that both panelists and everyone and everyone. And you
Gotcha.
should,
There we are.
I remember that from yesterday now.
See, this is why Zoom needs to have like an instructional designer or a UX designer to make that a little bit easier, right? I think we just proved the point.
Yeah, that's the first point of our whole talk here, right?
Awesome. So, all right. So I think we're starting to get some folks continuing to trickle in, but let's go ahead and get started today. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. This is going to be a great session. As soon as I saw that we were going to be doing a keynote on instructional design, I jumped on the opportunity to do the moderation because the instructional design piece has always been something that I think that the AV industry, specifically those in the frontline roles, kind of miss out on. I think it's honestly the missing piece. I know we all have our discussions on is AV IT, is IT AV, but I think at the end of the day, we need to also make sure that instructional design and designers are lumped into that conversation. So I think this is a great opportunity and I'm really looking forward to this morning's session. So we have some fantastic panelists joining us this morning and we will go around the horn and let them introduce themselves and we'll start off with Lisa.
Well, thank you, BC. I'm Lisa, excuse me, Lisa Stevens. I'm from the University of Buffalo. I have a dual role where I do some projects for SUNY. And of course, one of those projects includes FlexSpace. And we have a new way of integrating some of these planning pathways that may help inform this conversation. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Andy?
Hi, I'm Andy Vogel with The Ohio State University. I am an instructional designer with the College of Engineering. Previously, I did AV support and installs, so I have that kind of good lens of going from AV technician to instructional designer.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. And Josh.
I'm Josh Kaufman. I'm the Campus AV Services Coordinator for Tufts University. I have a master's in instructional design from the University of Massachusetts. In addition to all that, I'm also the co-chair of the AVIXA Tech Managers Council.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Again, I really appreciate you all joining us this morning for this session. I know even in the morning chat that we had before this, the instructional design got brought up. So I can tell there is quite a bit of interest in what this role is. So let's kind of tackle it first. Why don't Lisa, we'll start with you. What exactly is instructional design for those out there that have never really encountered that term or don't have a good background of it?
As Andy was introducing himself, the thought occurred to me, never trust an instructional designer that hasn't received a solder burn. Because I too have put together my fair share of classrooms, and instructional design for me is a specific discipline, and I see most of instructional design being applied in the learning management systems and working directly with faculty to kind of wireframe their class, if you will, to have maximum input with maximum exchange with the student, maximize the engagement. My personal opinion, just Lisa speaking, is that instructional designers tend to be very theory-based in terms of learning theory, and instructional supporters like myself tend to work more just from backwards design in terms of, here's your class, this is what we need to do from the AV side of the fence.
Very cool. Andy, what does kind of instructional design, what does that mean to you? Like, how do you think that plays in?
Yeah, so kind of to Lisa's point, we are very theory based, but we are a backwards design shop. A lot of our folks, myself included, we have our masters in instructional design and things like that, but we've also had those trades of being able to have that application side to it. So seeing, things, whether it's maybe a restaurant UI or it's a course shell being put together for training or student courses, we're really fortunate to kind of have both those worlds. It really helps influence how we make our design. I agree with Lisa. I think you have to have that application experience to really be successful. Obviously theory is important. Like, how would we design things with a critical lens if we didn't have those theories? But it's, very important to actually put those theories to work and try them and find what works for your institution, what works for your local context.
Gotcha. Thanks. And Josh, same question to you.
So from my perspective, and the reason I got into instructional design, ironically enough, is because there was no program available in instructional technology. And what I found as I was going through my graduate work is that there's this melding that needs to happen between technology and learning design that hasn't happened. And as we're designing our classrooms, we can no longer just say the minimum standard has to be, it has a projector, it has a screen, it has chairs. We have to think holistically how we're designing the room. And that's why so much of my work has been not just on the instructional design and not just on the technology side, but on the accessibility side and building the rooms to be universally accessible. Because if we're going to make our rooms usable, they have to be usable by our entire community, and our entire community is no longer just the random person who gets into the school and can sit in a lecture hall for a chalk talk. It's everybody and anybody who comes onto that campus.
Okay. Very cool, Josh. Thank you. So I'm going to open this up to all panelists. So just feel free to jump in. I'll throw this question out there, but how, kind of touch something on what Josh said, how can we tie AV and instructional design together better? Like, how can we apply some of your principles as we do design of classrooms and design classrooms to fit kind of how an instructional designer thinks about how a course should work?
Well, never being shy for words. I think most of our audience has probably at one time or another seen a FlexSpace presentation. And we always try to include that Venn diagram that describes, the faculty overlapping with the AV IT, overlapping with facilities design and architects, because each has to understand the other's world. And what I find is that these are all really hardworking, well-intentioned people that often talk right past each other with jargon-based, descriptions of things. And for me, the key to marrying instructional design with AVIT is in these high flex environments. How are we going to keep students engaged when one group of them are watching a recording, another group is video conferenced in, another group is sitting in front of the instructor? I mean, that's got to be, as one who has done some lecturing, it's challenging enough to not want to feel like an idiot in front of a room full of students by pressing the wrong buttons, So I need to work with an instructional designer and be informed by how we can connect those, disparate audiences, for lack of a better word, learner groups. Typically, it's through engagement in the LMS, but it's all for nothing if the audio is lousy. You have to be able to hear each other, have to be able to interact with each other. Speak extemporaneously. The student video conference needs to be able to speak to the point that the student just made inside the lecture hall. And that has to be understandable and something that the person viewing the recording can jump in, on a comment board later. How do we design those exercises? So, thanks.
I think you're go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to kind of like echo some of that, having the IDs and AV folks at the same seat at the table through a design process. Because, with the theme of what now, or, what's next, and now what, I got it wrong 2 times. Now what is, so we have these spaces, these hybrid and flex spaces. So faculty are now getting used to it. We have had some early adopters, and we still have some folks that are still getting on board, but it's really moving forward. And I think that's what Lisa was getting to, is what do these spaces look like in 5 years? How do we make a space, if we have 8 years of a refresh rate, what does that look like for a hybrid flex classroom? What tools are we going to be using? Is everything going to be a software delivery service? So, we're really crossing almost into admin applications and all sorts of, lanes. So it really requires everyone to see at the table. It requires working with faculty expectations and, showing them what is possible and, showing them what doesn't work. And, I'm sure we all have examples of currently not so great rooms that we can show this is not what we want to replicate.
I think that's something you're absolutely right there, Andy, you're touching on, is the idea that we need to be not just technologists, not just designers, we need to be educators ourselves. Because one of the things that I've found is most effective in my experience is working directly with the faculty, talking to them and saying, yes, I know you've always taught this way, taught doing, just writing on the board or just, showing your slides and reading the slides. That's not engaging. That's not going to be what students are expecting now. And even sitting them down and showing them how YouTube presenters are doing their, a lot of their content, or how people are doing their work, and showing them this is a new way of teaching. And I think one of the funniest things to me is when I sit people down, I'm like, look at how kids are learning off of YouTube. And one of the big prejudices I see is people are, YouTube's just, cat videos and whatever, and propaganda or whatever you want to call it. But then you sit them down, you show them, here's this guy who made a video how to disassemble your light engine, or I'll point out, this is how I learned how to fix this thing on my house, and use that rather than this is how to, just it's an entertainment platform. It really does change their viewpoint on how to teach engagingly, because you can't just read your slides anymore. You can't just write on the board.
Cool. So I'm not sure if you guys have it up or not, but there's a lot of discussion going on in the chat, I think, on something both Lisa and Andy touched on. And something else I also wanted to bring up as well is how do you handle that governance, right? Like how does, basically who do you guys work with to basically have the faculty know that their course is going through correct instructional design, or that a classroom can meet a specific design goal? Like how is that process managed, and how do you see the best outcome for that process to be managed?
I just popped over to Liesel's abstract and agree, that technology should never be the tail wagging the dog. And that each instructor is different. I mean, you would think there would just be more opportunities to sit and chat with one another. And I don't think it needs to be the same room everywhere. It's a question of what type of room, and then matching up the instructor needs with the room, be it departmentally or centrally scheduled. But when you speak to governance, one of the things we discovered when we were preparing for this panel was we are all from very large Research One institutions. Faculty at our ones are rewarded for their research. Their career advances based on that. Teaching is important, and every faculty member I know wants to be a good instructor, a good teacher. But I think it's a little different when I talk with my colleagues at the community colleges and at the comprehensive colleges in terms of how that governance functions. Because in those environments, I tend to see where the administration has a little more say in how something is managed at the enterprise level with their faculty versus a research institution. Did I have that right, Andy? Josh?
Yeah. And just some things like pulling from the chat with that too. Having, standard classroom design on campus, it's ideal from a serviceability point. From a teaching point, it's more difficult. So in one of my former roles, I managed, the not informal learning spaces, experimental learning spaces, and that required, special scheduling that the registrar just didn't have the capacity to do. So our team did it, and being a large university, it really comes into a numbers game of trying to, Tetris fit everyone in, but also trying to read their syllabus and making sure it is a right fit. So it's a challenge, definitely. And, I don't see that challenge going away, as we put in more tech and things. Currently, our university, we're looking at using like remote technology for a lot of software solutions, and stepping away from kind of like providing that bring your own device we're an iPad campus. We're now moving more to a cloud-based software solution. And a lot of that is to take the cost from the students having to pay for so much software. So that also is going to change what our classrooms look like, what our computer labs look like, and how we interact with them. So I don't have quite the answer. We're still kind of experimenting. What do we do with our existing labs and teaching spaces, but also bring in this remote element?
Okay.
Yeah, I think you both kind of hit the nail on the head with what you were saying there.
Awesome. So we did have a question come in that I want to throw out to you guys. So it's came from an anonymous attendee. We live in a time when we have at least 4 years of incoming freshman students who are suffering from acute anxiety as well as other invisible disabilities. What advancements in instructional design and/or pedagogical changes do you see that will help our students cope and adapt? Josh, I'll throw it to you first.
Thanks, BC. Yeah, so it's funny because this really speaks a lot to something that I've been pushing for professionally and personally for many, many years. I have my own struggles with anxiety and with other invisible disabilities, and that's something that has directly impacted my views on this, because the pedagogical changes that have to happen aren't the things that we've traditionally been doing. When we provide accommodations, we provide the things for visible disabilities or for easily mitigated things. We'll provide extra time on exams. We'll provide a quiet environment. We'll provide, the ability to bring a service animal. which admittedly is its own issue in some cases. But what we're not thinking about is how do we look at these things that affect everybody? And over the last 3 years-ish, we've completely shifted how a lot of our students have learned and what they've gotten used to and how they've gotten used to learning. And I think that one way that we can be accommodating of those invisible disabilities, and I'm thinking of anxiety in particular, but any other invisible disabilities, is going to be looking at how do we make our classes more flexible. It can't just be Sage on the stage. It can't just be you have to be in your seat. We have to start looking at how do we make our classes open to anytime, anywhere learning. And that's a phrase that I've been using since even before the pandemic when I started pushing for some of this stuff. We need to start having it be that our students can sit in the classroom or they can sit on the subway and they can still be accessing their course material. They can still be watching the lectures and they're getting the same benefit. I have instructors come to me, say to me, oh, but if they're not here, they're not learning. No, they are. And it's funny because I had talked to one of my relatives about this who doesn't work in education. And I said to him, what do you think on this? Because I wanted to see what somebody who isn't in the field thought. And they said, they're still going to class. They're still doing the class. As long as they're going to class, they're taking notes, they're doing whatever, that makes it, they're still going to class, they're still learning. So why are we not working towards that and making it not just you have to have an accommodation for it, but this is the default? And that's the other aspect. We have to remove the accommodate. We have to obviously legally provide the accommodation stuff. We have to remove that as the only way to access a lot of this stuff. The classes, the remote supports, can't just be restricted based on ADA need. It has to be universal.
Okay. Lisa, Andy, any thoughts?
Yeah, so a few of my thoughts were, I definitely agree with the universal design for learning, and having that access and flexibility, it kind of goes back to our governance of what governance do we have on faculty, what governance do we have on staff and tech to make sure that flexibility goes there. Because really, this is such a great question because it's a student affairs issue. Making sure we have mindfulness and wellness as resources to everyone on campus, making sure that faculty and staff feel empowered to make these flexible decisions. Like they have the resources to say, hey, I have a great classroom that will work for, if someone needs to be remote, audio is going to be good, participation audio is going to be good. They're going to hear everyone. Because that's been my reluctance with some faculty that as a student taking grad school classes, some are just like, well, we'll just do like a, asynchronous thing. The online stuff doesn't work well in this room. And, I'm not going to bother doing it, so it's kind of falling back to now what it's like, okay, so making sure we have the flexible tech, making sure we have the flexible, procedures for folks. I know our campus is really, in tune with the wellness stuff that, Tufts University is, we have the Buckeye Paws, the dogs that like to come through and stuff like that. And, we have mindfulness and wellness grants that people can apply for. So continuing those things and continuing those conversations is what's going to help. I don't have a direct answer other than, I think the central theme here is flexibility.
Lisa?
That's a tough one. Active learning, there's certainly plenty of literature now that suggests that that there's greater retention, both in numbers and of information. But what happens when the person that's sitting in the active learning classroom is an introvert? And how do we make sure that the curriculum is designed in such a manner that those people are fully engaged as well? So it's a challenge. I noticed that Marcus brought up the learning space rating system, and I responded that it does have measures of inclusion now as well. And that's one of the things that was added, Josh, was, examples of showing where you can have a quiet space off to the side. I just try to avoid loud noises. So nobody's startle response is
Awesome.
Always a plus, right?
So, one thing that I did want to bring up to you guys is that we're having I'm seeing a lot of discussion in the chat about classroom spaces and utilization. That's something I think we'll come back around to. But one thing I wanted to ask first is learning outside the classroom. And I think that we saw an explosion of this during COVID because we couldn't pack a lot of folks into a classroom. It was just not good. So we had informal learning areas set up outside or in larger facilities. How can AV and ID partner to better enhance these informal learning spaces? Because if you're using a flipped design, you're going to be doing a lot more of your work outside of the classroom, not just sitting there listening to a lecture. So I'm interested to get your thoughts on that.
One thing I would say, and it's funny when you say informal learning spaces and outside the classrooms, because I just remember in high school, whenever it would be nice weather, people saying, "Oh, can we have class outside?" And of course, being in New England, when it's nice weather, you got to take advantage of that. But sometimes our teachers did actually indulge that. But I think about informal learning spaces. I would say that's the ideal of the American college that we kind of have gone away from in a way. And I don't mean to sound like, one of these people who's talking about, let's take our colleges back to the 50s. But, the idea of the college is this place where we swap ideas and people are engaged in grand discussions and everything else. We already have a great deal of informal learning spaces on our campuses. It's just called the property. But what we need to do is have more ways for people to gather and spend that time together in a way that they're comfortable. And that does mean we have to start thinking about the hard surfaces and start thinking about where we put these little clusters of seating and huddle rooms and whatever else you want to call them, where people can, have conversations and talk. Because having, a bigger, broader conversation about social issues in the hallway is never going to be as effective as having it in, when you're sitting down, you're talking, you can maybe, sit, I just want to put, simply sitting down across from a person and looking at them, or, people might not feel comfortable talking about their personal experiences if they're just out, in the middle of the herd. So if we start start looking at our classroom buildings, and when we start doing to the studs renovations, putting in nooks and, little huddle rooms and everything else where people can sit, but then making them comfortable places and not feel like it's a place that you have to book or that you have to have some formal reason to be. And then that's going to give us those informal learning spaces that we did get during the pandemic from a lot of the things we had to put in place. But it'll also give us the ability to have people have these informal discussions that are the things that we want to put in our brochures.
Andy, Lisa, any thoughts?
So just to, the follow on Josh's point, yeah, the access is such a big thing there. Like you said, no booking or anything like that. Being able to just get in there, set your stuff down and meet with folks. We have a lot of touchdown spaces or huddle spaces and informal spaces that do that. But we also have a lot of spaces, that are lock and key, and, you have to go through a process. And there's some buildings have, better reasons than others to have that type of security. But the big thing, and a challenge that, we face is making sure we have access for our students to use those spaces, making sure they know where they are, how they can look them up, online, wherever, and feel comfortable going into a room like that and feel like you're not disturbing anyone and you can be in your place. It's not a library. You can talk and socialize.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if I had a photo of it, but we haven't put those pictures up yet. But outside of a lot of the big major supersized lecture halls, we have those little informal spaces. They're glassed in, but so you can get some quiet space to talk. But sometimes I think we forget how far we've come too. I mean, I'll grant you, it's been 20 years since I got my PhD, but we went from having no space to collaborate or meet with each other, none, unless you could find an unlocked classroom somewhere. Now there's all sorts of areas and hallways with comfortable furniture where at least you can talk with each other face to face. And now we're getting to a place where you can also invite in someone through Zoom or WebEx or So we're getting there. It's just, it takes time for that investment, I think, to roll out sometimes.
Absolutely. And the other thing that we're forgetting, we're talking about our students constantly with this. We have to think about our staff too, because one of the things that I think has been taught to all of us, and I would hope, I don't know if everybody agrees with it, is that the open floor plan offices should go away. Yes, we want collaboration, but giving people a space where they can also feel that, it's their own space where they control the narrative, if you will, in that space is so vital to people being comfortable in their work and in their workspace. We can't just say we need to have these people hiding, in a big open bay because that's what, people like. People don't like it. They just were told this is your option and here's a bunch of other perks in the tech world, and that's why they were willing to work at those places. But then when you're able to work from your living room or your spare bedroom or your dining room, suddenly people remembered, oh yeah, I actually like privacy. And so working collaboratively, but also having collaborative spaces, but then also having individual spaces is, for both the students and for the staff, and the faculty, is so critical as well.
Awesome. Thinking about space again, we've talked a lot about classroom space and also those informal learning areas. What would you all consider to be your perfect learning environment? What would if money and governance and all those fun red tape items were not in the way, how would you construct your ideal learning environment? And we'll go to Andy first for this one.
Thanks. So I, don't believe in learning styles. I believe that we can be taught through several different modes, and it's not just we learn one particular way. So I would design a room that can push all of that. Flexibility is the biggest thing. Everything on casters and wheels, tables, being able to have electric either on the wall or the ground. And I'm a big fan of just having displays on the wall so people can do breakout groups, push stuff off to the side. And I think that's really helpful. And also having like the space where maybe they're in the hallway, there's some touchdown spaces. So in my class last night, we have our breakout, we leave the big lecture room and we go find another classroom or somewhere else, having those private spaces. So really, like, I need a building that's just for active learning classrooms. So I need a lot of money here. And then it's just, its purpose is just for that sort of thing. It's just people go there to teach. There's no offices. Maybe, we'll put IT guys in the, in the penthouse, out of the basement. And then, that's what I want. That's my perfect ideal space.
Lisa?
I was just thinking if there's anybody in from Minnesota, we all need a Brunix Hall, which is exactly what Andy's describing. I mean, a whole building full of active learning spaces. I'm actually fortunate. I had the opportunity to rehab a very not deep, but wide lecture hall. And we were able to install beamforming microphones and cameras that were tied to the artificial intelligence. And I'm really impressed by how that room functions, because as an old broadcaster, I never thought I would see something that could function through AI as well as someone sitting on a board selecting cameras. So this particular room stays on a wide shot. A group of students or a student responds, whether it be someone in the room physically or out at a video conference site. It goes to that person. And the camera constrains to a small group of people, and then when that person's done talking and it doesn't pick up any of the pencil tapping or the side comment, it's like the AI is smart enough to know you have to speak a few words before it switches to you, and then boom, back to the wide shot or the instructor afterward. So it's highly functional. The students can break into small groups and do a learning activity by turning around and facing each other in small groups. Or, you can set up the breakout rooms in Zoom and then all come back together. So the only thing that's missing there is then how do you engage the students that were viewing it on the recording? Well, they're going to have to somehow or the other, get into a chat space or function that way.
Cool.
But man, technology. Whew.
Josh, throwing it to you.
It's funny. I spent a lot of time thinking about this because if I found a donor that would let me just have a blank check, but I think the biggest thing would have to be we can't just take an existing space necessarily and build it into what we need, because so many of our buildings, at least around here, are older and they're built in a time when we didn't have digital infrastructure, and in some cases even electrical infrastructure. So we end up with surface runs, and we end up with, if you open the walls, there's a lot of stuff in there that's going to cost extra to take out, and so on and so forth. In some cases, horsehair lath. But, what we're going to find, but I think it has to be, at the end of the day, is it has to be a room designed for flexibility, like you said, Andy. And it has to be a room designed that we don't have a specific purpose in mind for it. We can't have it be, oh, this is going to be a room for biology. It's going to have to be a room that is designed that any instructor can use it, or any student group that wants to study, or a student group that wants to have an event. It really has to be a multifunction space, but a multifunction space that isn't, the jack of all trades, master of none syndrome. It has to be a room that has that, ability to collaborate, but designed in a thoughtful way. So it's a room that can be used, with those displays along the wall, but then perhaps you want to use it for, event space. And so you can use those to display logos or whatever, or graphics, or whatever you want for the event. And I think as we're, the weird is going to sound very strange, but, if you watch the making ofs for things like The Mandalorian, and they have that, the they call it the vault, or whatever they call it, the void space that they use, almost akin to that, where we have a room where the walls can become as needed for classes or for non-classes or whatever. And I know there's no way on earth this will ever be done, but it would be an incredible opportunity, and it would give experiential learning a huge boost as well, because you could have people be not just looking at a picture, but see it in the size that it actually is for art history, or a walkthrough of a building for architecture as if you're actually in a building, and make it more usable to the end user without having to have them think, what's this? How does this actually look out? But how is it going to be in our space?
Very cool. So one question I have for you all is, we're thinking about spaces, and we're talking about different pedagogical goals and teaching methods. One question that I have, and it's something our campus did tackle, I think we were pretty successful at it, but other campuses I know do struggle with it, is how do you achieve that equity of classroom experience across different schools? So let's, your law, your business, your medical probably has a higher level of donor than, say, your divinity or your arts and science, or even music school, for example. How do you all foresee overcoming some of those challenges to give folks that are in a less funded area the same classroom experience as a school that has a high level of funding?
I like Harvard's method. When T.H. Chan, who was a graduate of their business school, wanted to donate a humongous amount of money to the business school, they turned it down. They said, no, we have more money than God. They said, donate it to another program. And so he donated it in honor of his father, or not, sorry, Jerry Chan, T.H. Chan was his father. He donated in honor of his father, T.H. Chan, to the School of Public Health, which was, much like many schools of public health, underfunded, and created this beautiful model school of public health. And I think that's where we need, what our schools need to be doing. If we have a chronically overfunded program and people want to do directed donations, then we should say, well, we're not accepting donations for, the richy rich school, but the school that needs it is this. Why don't you consider making your donation here? And it's going to take massaging of donors and having them look at it from a social responsibility standpoint. But I think that at the end of the day, if we find ways, and I hate to say, selling the naming rights or whatever is going to be how that is done.
Lisa, Andy, any thoughts?
Yeah, so really to me, it's for governance. So right, like I see donor disparity in the chat, and it's a real thing, on College of Education grad. And it's going to be relationships with our provosts and our academic affairs board to make sure we have these central rooms that can be used by everyone, but they're placed, in each district, fairly. It's not just, oh, engineering's got all the active learning classrooms now. They're in their buildings, even though they're for everyone. Faculty aren't going to want to commute the other side of campus. It's not feasible all the time. So it's having that relationship with the executive boards to have those type of conversations, because unfortunately, with donor disparity, I don't see that going away. It's just at a university as big as we are, it's just, that's unfortunately part of the game.
Mm-hmm. So one thing I did want to pivot to is back to a little more of the tech side. And what are, at least you brought up AI and how you had a really good experience with it. And I know AI is one of those still kind of to be an emerging technology in this field. Like, I think the manufacturers and the designers are still trying to figure out how this is going to really apply in our vertical. But how do you all foresee AI enhancing the student and, Josh, to your point, the staff and faculty experience, both inside and outside the classroom when it comes to design?
That's a tough one because, it's like, I'll be perfectly honest, when we talk about DEI and built environments, I'm still struggling to understand how to enhance physical environments to help make accommodations for people. And I feel a little bit the same way around AI. How is that going to impact the AV side of the formula? I'm not entirely sure. I do have a lot of interest in how sensor technology is impacting research. I think there's a few talks emerging right now about how microphones can be used to sound source where there's activity in a room. Sensors can pick up how chairs move around. So I think there's something to be said for measuring engagement and using some AI to assist with that. Beyond that, I'm not too sure.
I'm really interested in like the academic course design side to see how AI can just do things from writing learning objectives and delivering learning modules. I think what it will do, it's going to push us to be better researchers. Obviously we've seen what it can do. It can do outlines, it can write papers and that sort of things, and that obviously brings a plagiarism issue and all that stuff. So faculty, staff, we're really going to have to be prepared to combat that. But as practitioners, we're really going to need to learn ways to, figure out what our research is, help use AI in a way to help us research and find ways and methods, where we're not plagiarizing and just taking someone else's idea and repeating it again and again. I know there's a whole debate on, publish and perish, but that's going to be some of the struggles that we're going to have to find. And I think it's really just going to push us to put more quality work out there.
I agree. Although I have to say the one element I've started already seeing all the hand-wringing news stories. Oh, ChatGPT is going to increase cheating in class and this and that. Last time I checked, they said that about Zoom. They said that about learning management systems. They said that about the internet. They said that about Wikipedia. They said that about having a tape recorder in class, and they said that about cell phones. And this is all just in since I've been in high school. So I don't know how much of that to actually think is it really going to impact us to the degree that we're thinking, or is that going to be another one of those things that fizzles out because everybody just kind of forgot about it, or it doesn't turn out to be as promising as it was when it was shiny.
So thinking of some other tools that are out there, I know that we have, and I saw it mentioned in the chat a couple times, the learning space rating system that EDUCAUSE has, and even FlexSpace as another tool. How do you all see these kind of integrating into our workflows to kind of help us generate those ideas?
Well, I know a thing or two about FlexSpace. So I'm happy. I will keep this short for all of you who have probably heard it too many times, but by the way, we're in the process of rebuilding that portal. So would be very interested if, I'll put my email in the chat, if anybody would like to look at the wireframes or how things are coming along, this is your chance to help us make it better for the functions that irritate you or the ones you like that you want to see kept. But this new flexible FlexSpace integrated planning pathway, I think, is something that can help all of our institutions, because you're starting with the LSRS. So once you decide what it is you want to measure, be it a department or a building or a campus, whatever, you can turn students loose to do that. You don't necessarily have to tie up staff time if you can train some student assistants. But once you get that data and then sort it from high to low, you're already a hero, because now you've given your provost, your senior executive leadership, some data. But then the key is you overlay your strategic enrollment data on top of all of that, and it further refines, where might we need to make investment. And the reason I mention that is because once you have that data, once you have a little bit of, maybe this is where we need to be investing, now everybody on that advisory panel can get a FlexSpace account and use those idea boards in the background, a private idea board just for your advisory group, pull in the spaces you want to talk about. And at that point, you can go back and say to your faculty, these are some ideas we have. If you've got the faculty, the designers, and the instructional designers, the AVIT people all represented at that table, you can have some really good open conversations, and that builds security within your faculty, because now they understand how the investment's being made. I mean, the Hunger Games gets tamped down a little bit with the individual departmental budgets.
Mhm.
Oh, we see why they need some investment in that area. We can see where our investment will come at a later time, or vice versa. It's all about world peace.
Josh, Andy, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think just to that last piece where you're talking about, seeing departments seeing the benefit, even if you're not investing directly in that department at that time, that comes to one of the big issues at every school I've worked for, and I think all of yours as well, where you have these constituent colleges or these sub departments or whatever you want to call them, and each one has their own little personal fiefdom of classrooms, and invest in those at your peril, because not only are they the rooms that you're not be able to put into your general pool of rooms, but they're also the rooms that they really get to say what they're putting in there. And I think at the end of the day, the easiest way for us to move away from that is going to be not moving away from the constituent colleges, but moving away from the constituent facilities. So saying, hey, just because you're part of, yeah, exactly what Tim just said here, death to the silos. Just because you're part of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, just because you're part of the School of Engineering, great, but that room is still a pool room, and I can put an art history classroom in there. I can put somebody from the French department in there, just so that we can, try to make more equitability in our design, because that way we don't have to think, hey, let's just make this as, friendly, as equitable as we can, while also respecting departmental individual needs.
For everyone that didn't see, Lisa had to jump off. She was actually on site at a hospital today doing some other work. So she's been a fantastic contributor. I want to thank her a whole bunch for jumping on today. So But we still got about 10 minutes to keep this chat going. So I think we have a few more questions that have come in. An anonymous attendee asked, are either one of you all seeing smart boards be deployed, or are you deploying smart boards? Are they being well received by faculty? It's specific to smart boards, but also, are there any pieces of technology that are being put into learning spaces that are just not used, or they're shiny toys that might have thought they were good from a conceptual standpoint, but in the production environment, they just don't work?
Yeah, in a former role, my job was to retire a lot of that technology. It has kind of come back. We've had some spaces with different touch boards and things like that, in addition to like a display. So it was kind of supplemental. It wouldn't be the main display. The idea was, if for remote teaching or hybrid teaching, the faculty wanted to do something on PowerPoint and annotate for the remote folks. That was the idea behind it. Not too many. Now, this is anecdotal. I don't have the hard data, but the faculty receiving it, I haven't seen a lot of feedback from folks. Some of them, it's nice to have another monitor to do chat monitoring, but not necessarily the touchscreen features.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had smart boards at my first school at Boston University, and like a lot of our classrooms, we had the little smart thingies or smart monitors on the podiums. And it was a love-hate thing with our faculty and with our support staff, because either they worked great or they crashed on a daily basis, and our support staff wanted to office space them. So it was, and when I finally got away from there and started seeing schools that weren't using them, it made me very happy. The funny thing is, actually, we're talking about this, just literally yesterday, I was going through all my tickets from that I had not dealt with before, from the like that I was going to deal with over spring break when the pandemic hit. And one of them was removing a smart board from a classroom that had been abandoned there. It didn't even work.
Mm-hmm.
And it had been abandoned there simply because it was one of those proprietary spaces I was talking about. So they had to pay us to take it out. And that no longer is a thing because now we're centrally funded. But at the time it was, I was negotiating with them for them to pay for the labor for us to come in and take that out. And Mike Pearson, you're talking about Wacom tablets. We put a lot of those in a lot of rooms, and people like those a lot. And Johanna, I agree with you as well there. Document cameras any day of the week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every room's got it.
I think I've only seen one successful smart board deployment, and that's in my wife's kindergarten classroom. That's been the only one so far.
Well,
I was gonna say, the only place I see them used is K-12.
Yeah.
And that's because that's their room.
Yeah.
That's their board. It's not a shared space. And that's where I think, because then they have the training, the repetitiveness of using that tech.
Mm-hmm. And just speaking specific of smart boards, and I've saw Tim's talking about Newline in there. I think probably its biggest fail point is the fact that they've been so isolated on when they've installed. You have to think about that product line as an ecosphere. Like you can't have X manufacturer and Y manufacturer over here, and then because you got two separate modalities you got to train for. It's all got to be the same thing. So
I remember it didn't play nice with PowerPoint.
No, not even a little bit. So, all right, guys. One more question I have for you. And this came in from Christian Kelly a little while back in the chat thread. Was how do we design for different generations of learners? The generation of learner that's coming in the next few years. They had 2 years of remote and 2 years of on-site learning. So they're coming in with radically different notions of what learning is. And then I'm sure the generation after that will be, thinking of, have different ways that they've been taught and different environments that they've learned in. How do we scale and change for these generational differences?
Yeah, I think that goes back to our, our mindfulness and wellness talk. And that's, learning communities and cohorts are really important, whether it is a hybrid, remote, or in person. I think having that ability, especially at a large campus, being able to construct those cohorts so you have those face-to-face interactions that you may have not had previous. So those are the type of things that I think are really going to help, and having kind of like, these informal spaces that faculty actually want to have students meet there, say, hey, outside of class, go meet in this space. It's, if it's a reservation thing, it's reserved for them, whatever, but give them the flexibility to do that, and then that will help, them achieve, I believe everyone doesn't just have one learning style. I think we all learn several ways. So I think that having that flexibility will encourage that.
I think flexibility is key because right now we don't know what's coming. We know what's coming in the next generation of, and the next maybe 2 cohorts of learners in higher ed, because they're the ones who went to school during the pandemic. We don't know what's coming with the 3rd generation after that. Even if the kids who were in kindergarten when in 2020, when they come, we don't know how their learning is going to have changed, because we don't know how learning is going to change in the classrooms, because some places are rushing back to let's do everything the way we did it in 2019. And some are saying, let's keep adapting and changing and finding out what's new. So we have to be able to accommodate both of those as well. And we have to say, okay, we're still going to have butts and seats at some points, but we're still also going to have to say we're going to have the ability of people to take their class from their dorm room or from their, flexible spaces on the campus. We're never going to be rid of lecture halls. I hope one day we can get rid of the 100,000, the 400 person 101 class where the instructor is the size of, a pin on a stage because you're sitting all the way in the nosebleeds. But, I think that we can move away from, a lot of the way that we've taught for years, but we have to do it in a thought through method and a holistic method. And we have to work with our faculty. It can't just be a dictate. We have to say to them, hey, how do you want to change education? How do you want to, for things to get better? Because we're not going back, but we want to work with you. We're not just going to tell you how to do it because we're not you. And so it needs to be a 2-way conversation. And it's going to be a lot of trial and error too. There's going to be a lot of, hey, did this work? Did this not work? And move on.
Awesome. Thank you both. I think we've got one last question that came in from Chris Dietrich. I probably just butchered that, and I apologize, Chris, but I'm not the best at names sometimes. He would like to hear feedback on the different learning requirements between undergrad, graduate, and doctorate programs. If all 3 levels of instruction are being taught in the same space, what would you consider a need versus a nice to have to provide an effective learning environment?
From my perspective, because we do teach all of our classes in the same spaces, we don't have, with the exception of our medical program. The biggest thing is that we have to have a base level of technology in those rooms. And if that means we have to have and say, oh, yeah, we're going to have, a projector and the ability to go to Zoom and the ability to have this interactivity, that's going to be where we're going. It can't just be, that we say, oh, there's a minimum for undergrad and a minimum for master's and a minimum for a doctoral program, because they're all using the same space. We can't just overlay.
Through our course design, we look at sort of like what type of students are taking, so if it's undergrad, if it's a survey class, or if it's more of a core class for a master's, we look at like, okay, what is the learning objectives for this course and what is it? So like for a neuroscience class, that's like an intro. Maybe it's not something where this person's going to be a neuroscience researcher, but they're going to be working around it. So they need, the content of it, the 101 of it. So smaller class sizes is like a big thing to help with that. If you can't achieve that, being able to do little cohorts or groups within a large class, I think allows that. Chris, I don't know if you're asking so much about the physical space or the, pedagogical space, but to me, it's really having, again, the flexibility, having that type of cohort. And I really think graduate school does it a lot more in some undergrad programs do, like there's business clusters and things like that. But I would like to see universities do that, across the board a lot more and design their classes, in a way instead of these one-off group projects. Like this semester or this program, you're with these people, you're going to be working with them, you know, it's like that's the real world, you know.
I think there's something to be said for that cohort model. Because I know in my master's program, I was in the same classes over and over and over and over. It was a small program. And so I got to know these people. And I think, that does help us in the real world. We have to get along with people who are different from us. And, so forcing people, I should say, to be in that mindset kind of helps.
Absolutely.
Well, Andy, Josh, we are at time. Do you all have any final thoughts you want to throw out there?
Just, happy to see what everyone's working on. I'll put my email in chat if you want to get contact or, chit chat later.
Yeah, same thing. I'm going to throw my email and my Twitter in there. Many of you probably know my Twitter as well. And if just the final thing also, if you're interested at all in instructional design or anything else, please definitely feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, Andy, Josh, thank you both so much for your time this morning. And also want to thank Lisa Stevens, who had to drop off a little earlier. This has been a great conversation. I hope we get to keep it going online, and hope everybody had some great takeaways from it. So thanks for joining.
Thanks, everybody.